all good to mute ourselves.
Okay, I want to go ahead and jump in and get started just to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us today and coming to the Arts and Justice Research Workshop, Staging Justice Through Opera, a roundtable of artists. And of course, a big thank you to the Stanford Humanities Center who sponsors this event, alongside Professor Jisha Menon, who spearheads this event as a director on campus, an incredible faculty member. And so I also, in particular for this event, want to give a shout out to Stanford Live and to the Hopkins Center for the Arts at Dartmouth College, who co-commissioned the ritual A Breath is the Right to Resist in 2019, and are generously allowing us a preview today, a sneak peek with the artists and kind of a peek behind the scenes to the process creation and of course the intellectual curiosities and ethical motivations that spawned this work. So thank you to everyone who made this possible. I know we're all eager to delve into this conversation as we consider these themes, but just so you know the lay of the land, after hearing from each speaker individually, we'll then move into a moderated conversation and then allow Q&A from each of you. So at any point in the time, go ahead and put a question in the question and answer function. Our moderator will handle that and keep that for later. Don't feel the need to wait until the end to ask a question. We'll keep that on stack for you. But without further ado, I really just want to thank Aaliyah McLaughlin, who is our generous moderator and is of course a doctoral candidate in musicology at Stanford University. Her research focuses on Blackface performance and its afterlife in the 20th and 21st centuries. In particular, she's interested in Black women performing in blackface and the related issues of Black femininities and subjectivities. She holds a BA in music from Florida State University, where she studied voice and popular music. So thank you so much, Aaliyah, for moderating today, and truly just take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Anna. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. In this segment of the roundtable, each of our panelists will present for about 15 to 20 minutes each, and I will introduce each of them before they speak. So we'll start with Jonathan Berger. Jonathan is an acclaimed composer and Denning Family Provostial Professor in Music here at Stanford University, where he teaches at the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. Much of his work is informed by science and technology, and his recent compositions revolve around questions of consciousness and the human condition. His 2013 one-act chamber operas, Theotokia and The War Reporter, explore auditory hallucinations and a haunted conscience. And his monodrama, Milai, written in 2015 for the Kronos Quartet, reflects on trauma, responsibility, and duty that arises in fields of conflict. In 2016, Jonathan won both the Rome Prize and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Among other prestigious projects, he was commissioned 3 times by the National Endowment for the Arts. So Jonathan, thank you for joining us today. I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Aaliyah. And thank you, Anna. Thanks, Jisha and the Arts Institute. And while we're giving thanks, I want to thank Stanford Live and the Hopkins Center for the Arts and our producer, Kim Leitner, who is really kept their faith in this project and guided it through the roadblocks and detours of COVID. It's been quite an experience, and it is ongoing. So, and of course, thanks to the entire creative team for being resilient and dedicated and keeping this project alive through thick and through thin. I thought I'd start with a few thoughts about my music and how this piece fits into it. So as Aaliyah mentioned, my music often addresses issues of social justice and ethics. And I like to look through the lens of a single person, of an individual who's faced by an unimaginably difficult situation and making impossible decisions. So a couple of examples, an orchestra piece of mine called Luba was about a popular singer, Luba Levetsky, who lived during the Holocaust, who died in the Holocaust, and forwent the opportunity to live safely outside the Vilna ghetto in order to be able to continue her teaching and cultural uplifting of the community and to smuggle food into the ghetto. When she was caught, she was forced to march naked to her execution and reportedly sang the song that made her famous along the way. So that was the source of that. My monodrama, Milai, which Ilya mentioned, faces the massacre of hundreds of civilians through the perspective of Hugh Thompson, who was a reconnaissance helicopter pilot who observed the operation and took it upon himself to intervene and stop the killings, or try to stop the killings. So these are people making impossible decisions. And that was the case with Ritual of Breath, which confronts the police lynching of Eric Garner. However, as the work developed and was shaped by our librettist, Vayavi Francis, who unfortunately is not here today, and by Niegel Smith, our director, the person who was placed in that unimaginable situation shifted from Eric to his daughter, to Eric's daughter, Erica. And that proposed a conceptual shift in how the opera unfolded, which for me was really fundamental and interesting. So Ritual has evolved over the past 4 years, transforming and transmuting and pushing me into very foreign and uncharted territories as a composer. The musical ideas originally arose in response to Enrico's stunning paintings. Enrico and I, we'll probably talk about this later on, but Enrico and I shared a year at the American Academy in Rome, and that gave rise to this and as one of a number of collaborations. The original idea of the work, although it's long in the past now, began with the metaphor of a suffocating fish deprived of water, which in itself was an allusion to one of my favorite Yiddish folk tales, a Chelm story about a fish that's punished for slapping the rabbi and is sentenced by the court to death by drowning. And so what originally was going to be a comic opera actually turned, as Enrico and I sort of talked about it, turned into this sort of terrifying metaphor. But then when Vayavi came on board and wrote the libretto, the fish metaphor was left behind, and instead Vayavi delivered an incredibly rich and multi-layered text which introduced Erica as a presence. And Erica was mourning and reflective and angry. And then when Niegel joined the team, he again reshaped the work such that Erica almost emerged as the protagonist of the opera, and her call to activism became a really positive and driving force. So the entire sort of affective frame of the opera focused only years after we began to work on this. For me as a composer, that change posed the challenge of how to transform the audience from a typically passive group in an opera house to a group engaged in activism. That was the mantra of the piece, is that we want to evoke and and create a sense of activism. So, so I tried to create a sonic environment that would induce entrainment and synchronized breathing, and that was the idea that was how the work would start. And as the audience breathed together, we then decided to include a community chorus. We discussed ways to make the audience members actively participate in the work. And as the work developed, it became increasingly immersive and increasingly interactive, which for me was completely foreign ground. All of that, of course, came to a completely screeching halt with the pandemic. And so then the work changed radically again, and our efforts to adapt to the unknown, reimagining the work as a mediated performance, rethinking the community chorus as a single singer, and redesigning the electroacoustic component to adapt to the variability of audio quality. And turning to my colleague Chris Chafe's Jack Trip network audio technology, which facilitated remote rehearsals. So there is something live about this piece that's working and being worked on, thank heavens. But where I am struggling through the sense of it's at arm's length and not yet tangible. And then amidst the pandemic and amidst all that happened, of course, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd were murdered. And that suddenly made this project agonizingly prescient. And it actually raised a sense of self-doubt in my ability to see this project through. So let me just say a few words about the music before turning it over to whoever's next in the alphabet. In Eric Garner's death, of course, was recorded, was video recorded, and is painfully available. And in that agonizing audio recording, before his murder, he confronts the police officers and he says, "For who? For who? For who? Every time you see me, you want to mess with me. I'm tired of it. It stops today." Let me just play Eric's voice. So so I took that recurrent "for whom" and I had the saxophone, I sort of transmuted that to the saxophone. And the opera, early in the opera, the saxophone plays this. This is a paltry sounding mock-up of it, so forgive the sound, but you get the musical sense.
Jonathan, I hate to interrupt. I can't hear it very well. Are you sharing audio?
Sharing audio. I thought it was.
Would you mind maybe resharing it just so that we can hear it a little bit better? It's kind of quiet, like it's coming through the mic or something.
Let's try this. Oops. Sorry, let me try this.
No worries. Great.
Better?
Yes.
So similarly, I transcribed the entire last words of Eric Garner, and that becomes sort of a presence in the piece. Another musical allusion is the vidui. The vidui is the confession intoned during the Yom Kippur service, in which the congregation faces collective and individual guilt, and and admits to it and responds to it. So there's this wonderful ritual of collectively beating the breast and making this admittance. I'm going to play a short excerpt of the Vidui chanted by Stanford's cantor Yoav Schlesinger. I think. Here.
שאין אנחנו הזפנים וכשעורף לומר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו אבל אנחנו חטאנו ay 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 Ashamnu Bagadnu Gazalnu Nibarnu Dofi. And
this is how it transmutes itself into music. Again, apologies for the awful mock-up here. So that will be replaced someday by the incredible sound of Nima Becker-Smith, who will be Erica. So the Vidui in the opera is followed as the opera ends with a call to resist. And I thought I would end my little segment here, not with my words, but with Viaviv Francis's words. And she writes, "So when the breath is lost, what remains is more a stain on the sidewalk, smoke in the mouth, a yellowing photograph and a cracked album, a final kiss before burial. Some of us will die, but more of us will live. So witness, when a brother's breath fails, we pick it up. When a sister's breath fails, we pick it up. Take that breath into our own body. Keep breathing anyway, any way we can." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I believe you then we will move on to Enrico. Are you able to, let me see, to stop screen sharing? I'll go ahead and introduce Enrico.
Yes.
And okay, great, perfect.
All
right. Thank you. No worries. Thank you so much. That was so fascinating.
For someone who spent all day on Zoom,
yes. No, it was great. All right, next we have Enrico Riley. Enrico is a visual artist, a professor and department chair of studio art at Dartmouth College. Dartmouth is Enrico's alma mater, where he earned a BA in visual art. He also earned an MFA in painting from Yale University. His work explores the complex issues of race, violence, and vulnerability, particularly in connection to historical and contemporary Black American experiences. He is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Rome Prize in Visual Arts, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters Purchase Prize in Painting. His work has been featured in galleries and museums nationally and internationally, including at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art in Richmond, Virginia, the American Academy of Arts and Letters in New York City, and the American Academy in Rome, Italy. Enrico, thank you so much for joining us today. I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and thanks for the introduction. I too want to thank the Hopkins Center, Stanford Live, Kim Whitener, and everyone who's been working both technically and creatively on ritual breath. Jonathan, I think, went through a bit of the chronology about how this all started, and I'll pick up from there a bit, and then just sort of delve into a little bit the sort of visual underpinnings of what sort of might happen in the final version of the opera, as it has been evolving quite a bit since 2016. So in 2014, I began a new body of work that was really in response to the plethora of police videos that we were all witnessing as a nation. And I was in my studio working on work that was gestural and moderately figurative, but certainly carrying on this sort of abstract work that I really had been educated through. But seeing all of these videos really forced me to really think about what was happening in my work, and it felt a bit ridiculous given emotionally how I was feeling. It felt pertinent to begin to address this problem directly. So I began in earnest and almost intuitively and reflectively making a series of drawings that explored ideas of sort of unknown assailants, unnamed assailants, sort of mobs of people, groups of people, and individuals really being victimized. And I think it's sort of a complicated subject matter to deal with in terms of framing particular individuals sort of just as victims. But there's something visceral for me about watching these men of various ages really being stripped naked in front of us of their humanity. There was something just so out of control, and so such a continuum of the way things had been and have been in the country, that that visceral reaction, I think, came out in the work. So that's sort of the backdrop and the beginning of this body of work that I was working on at the time, called Infinite Receptors. And that's the work that I carried to Rome and was continuing in Rome, where Jonathan and I met each other. And I will just sort of go through a bit of a visual slideshow to show you some of that work and sort of how that work has evolved. In a way, there's two parallel tracks. There's the work that I'm doing in relation to this project that's growing out of my own personal work, and then working in collaboration has invariably changed the work that I'm working on personally. So I'm going to share. And get into presenter mode. So again, the works really started in 2014 as drawings, and then the paintings began to follow maybe 9 months behind them in 2015. This is called Midnight Hunting. It's about 60 by 64 inches. This is called Untitled, A Very Old Game Revisited. It's another large canvas. These were all done before Rome. This is a decent example of the types of drawings that I was working on. I'd work on these at night usually after teaching, generally going through the day. And it was really an amazing experience to sit in bed with a headlamp and work on these, and then fall asleep and wake up and sort of look through my sketchbook and see what I had done the night before. All of the paintings from Infinite Receptors comes, they sort of came from these drawings compositionally. This is one of the paintings that was worked on in Rome. This is called Untitled Remembrance of Things Present. There is this allusion to the mob behind, a figure mourning, a figure laid out. The scene is taking place both inside and outside, indoors and outdoors at the same time. A lot of these works are very much influenced by the incredible artist Philip Guston. And for a lot of different reasons, I found myself drawn to his work, but in particular, I think the way that he thought about and deployed in a way a kind of humor and a kind of slapstick and a sort of courting of cartoon figures in his work to sort of go along with the harder subject matter that he was working on, in particular in his late works. This is called Untitled Martyr Into the Hole. These are beginning to be done after Rome. This is 2018. This is called Evening, the Night Watchman. This is called Untitled Witness, Skywalker, the Symbolic Importance of Flight. Jonathan started to mention how Eric Garner began to take on the role as the primary figure or protagonist in the project. And there certainly was correlation in these paintings with regards to thinking about and trying to represent the female form, which in many instances I think gets left out of these stories. And so in speaking with Jonathan and Vivi and Niegel, we really began to position Erica as the main protagonist and as a witness. I think this idea of witnessing very much shows up in the titles of many of my paintings. And here we have a female witness, levitating over the earth, witnessing both past, present, and hopefully not future acts of violence. It's another witness painting. This is a relatively newer painting, jumping ahead here. This is called Untitled Witness, She Brings Fire. And it's a more defiant portrayal of this female protagonist. I've given her a sort of pantsuit, and she's holding a sword in her left hand, and again, she's levitating and bearing witness. music is an extremely important subject for me. Thinking about music as a tool of resistance, thinking about music as a tool for survival, and really thinking about its importance inside of the African American community. This is called Untitled Rhythmening Resistance Through Music. Rhythmening is the title of a Thelonious Monk song. And I always thought that that was just particularly brilliant, the fact that he would name a song that. So it's another large painting dealing with this idea of music being transported through the middle passage, that information coming to the new world. Resistance. This is called Untitled Blue Sky, Blue Skies at Sea, Towards the Future. We have a figure cutting his binds and holding drumsticks and a small paperback book in his back pocket. A few more images. This is called Untitled Midnight, the Party. Thinking about, still thinking about music, thinking about it through the metaphor really of jazz, through this idea of cobbling together different types of influences. And again, that music really being used as a tool, or for me, thinking about it in that way. This is called Untitled Midnight, the Party, Ritual of Breath. Untitled The Party, Illuminating the Night. It's just a detail. How do we hold on to the humanity of these people who are being killed? How do we try to maintain and still recognize their humanity? Maybe it's Erica. She's glorious. And then finally, these are a few sort of newer pieces. So let me turn this off 1 second. Just 1 second here, a little technical difficulty. These are some newer pieces that are in relation to the change that's been happening in the piece. And these are really, they're sort of screen grabs and sort of collages of me working through that transcript of Eric Garner's last monologue as he's being arrested. And Jonathan played some bits and pieces of that. I began to work on drawings in relation to that, listening to it, reading it, and engaging in rewriting his words. The process of working on this project has led me through a lot of different kinds of experimentation, a lot of different kinds of ways to express. And Niegel might sort of touch on it, but we're sort of creating a lot of different piles of different information, different material that's then going to be put together appropriately along with the music. Luckily, we have someone named Peter Negrini, who's going to be our visual arts director, who's going to really spearhead that part of the project. During the pandemic and during the time that we haven't been able to meet, there's also been this way that I think all of us have tried to wrestle with video, wrestle with digital format as a way to communicate, and noticing and thinking about the protests around a lot of these issues being disseminated through video and social media. So again, this is really me sort of jumping into that language, jumping into that medium. But in the end, I just want to come back to this idea of the humanity of these individuals. And, I think we don't want to lose sight of the fact that Eric was a real person. All of these people had lives. And it's the fact that we allow ourselves to lose sight of their humanity that allows for these events to really take place. So that's where I'd like to stop. Again, these are just sort of a bunch of images of my own work, my own personal practice, and pieces that are moving into the opera and have influenced how we're thinking visually about the visual components of the opera. Not all of it will be used, but it's just sort of a peek into that information.
Thank you so much, Enrico, for sharing your work with us. I believe I will turn it over to Niegel Smith. I'll introduce him. Niegel is the artistic director of Obie award-winning theater, The Flea, in Lower Manhattan. He is a board member of Alliance of Resident Theaters, New York, an arts service organization that supports nonprofit theaters in New York City. He also works as a ringleader of an artist activist organization called Willing Participant that performs creative responses to pressing events. Niegel is the co-director of a 24-decade history of popular music, a 24-hour show that features 246 songs that were popular in the United States from 1776 to 2016. The show is the winner of the Kennedy Prize in Drama, a Bessie Award, the Edwin Booth Award, and a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Among his other impressive directing credits, Niegel was the associate director, the off-Broadway production of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, and the Tony Award-winning musical, Fela. Niegel, thank you so much for joining us today. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Aaliyah, and just big thanks to everyone at Stanford and at Dartmouth, and to the incredible collaborators who've welcomed me into this project. Folks could be doing so much with their time and care and enjoying themselves, and yet we're showing up to insist that my life matters, that all of Black lives matter, and that these senseless murders have to end. And the question that we're positing here today around the intersection of arts and justice has never been a question for me. I grew up, unfortunately, with the knowledge from a very early age that for Black men in America, by the age of 21, 50% of them were either dead or in prisons. This is what I had to know growing up. This is what my parents had to prepare me for. This is what it meant to be a young boy growing up in rural North Carolina, and then my teenage years in Detroit. And thankfully, my community, we persevere and we use art and we use worship and praise as spaces to claim our humanity. And those were spaces that, for me, were filled with joy and were filled with music and were filled with story. Whether it was, a Pentecostal church down south or protest songs of Marvin Gaye. And so, I just I was pulled to this work. I was pulled to Ritual of Breath. The things I was doing before. You mentioned Fela, Fela Kuti, the activist, songwriter, performer of Lagos, Nigeria, staging that show on Broadway and on tour. With willing participant, creating these poetic actions. We created this action for Trayvon and involving our community in New York City, and staging plays like Scraps, which is about the repercussion of the loss of a young Black man to his community, his young child, his girlfriend, his mother, his best friends. What do we have to do? How do we carry these things with us? And so much of the work is about witnessing these acts, and how do we then activate ourselves? What is the invitation that the artist makes to the audience to both consider, reflect, and then get out your seat and do something about it? I was thrilled when I, was asked to have a meeting with Enrico and Jonathan and Vivi. At that time, there was a draft of the libretto, and the structure was a 7-part ritual, which spoke deeply to me. I'm always curious about, okay, so how is the structure both giving me something, but also asking for my sacrifice as an audience member or as a participant in it? And here was at the center, as Jonathan pointed out, Erica, a Black woman, an activist, a leader, a community organizer. And what was she wanting to turn our attention to? And so then I began to think conceptually around invitation. What are we inviting our audience into? And Jonathan was like, oh, suddenly it became this participatory work. For me, it's if you show up, you got to show up. You can't just sit in the dark. And at that big early part, we were thinking about breath and the meditative nature of breath and that consideration and sitting with an incident. And as Jonathan spoke earlier, literally getting the audience to breathe and synchronously, which I think is a radical act when we know so many folks in our country don't care if I'm breathing, don't care if you're breathing. So this opera says, here's a gorgeous, beautiful music composed by Jonathan. Here's these images that are have this aesthetic thing that you can't look away from. It's challenging, and yet you're gonna come together. And you're gonna consider together this act of breathing. Part of my role in all of this is to bring together a team of other interpreters, scenic designer, lighting designer, costumes, and one of the things we began to ask is how do folks get into this work? Because I believe the work begins with the first invitation, and so even before we get to the first note that Jonathan's composed or the first image of Enrico's that we've seen, there's an email or a posting or something that goes out and says, hey, you want to be at this? And it just occurred to us that should be in the voice of our protagonist, Erica. So when this work premieres, you will see and hear her first. she'll say, you got to show up, you got to be here. One of the things I love about this group of artists I'm working with is that, you know, we understand that the work we're making is for a wide audience. And so it invites the populace, but it is, the aesthetic of it is not a populist aesthetic. You know, I'm going to leave it to Jonathan and Enrico later when we talk with questions and such to talk more deeply about how they approach. But I'm an avant-gardist, and that's something I celebrate in my Blackness. And is what are the different ways in that we see in stage work that is beyond the traditional. And so part of that is the lingering, the reflective space. Part of it is, the metaphorical. One of the things that is an absolute gift in this work is that in this ritual, Erica, she's in the dream space, she's in the prayer space, she's walking in the space with the ancestors, she is in the teaching space and modality. And so her father, Eric, actually shows up in two forms. So it's embodied by the sax and voiced by the sax, which lives on stage, separated. Our scenographers created this great liminal, this separation point, which we can stage that tension between the living corporeal world and the world of the ancestors. And what is, how do we get closer and separate it? And what is that desire to get back to the voice? But then he also exists in corporeal form through a dancer, because Vivi, imagine, in that moment when you're like, oh my gosh, if only my loved one could be back. She writes, the body intact, the blood in its vessels. Which is inspiring. I mean, look, I'll just speak for myself. Yeah, I was 6 years old. My great-grandmother had passed away. We had the funeral. And the next night, she was in my room. Okay. Grandma Dorothea was right there. The ancestors are with us. So that's in the libretto. And then Jonathan gives us this gorgeous waltz. And so I'm like, oh, shit. Okay, so we need to have this wonderful dance in this moment in the midst of this ritual opera in which, father returns embodied by Trebien, and he and daughter get to dance together again. All right, so two things are happening there. One is, oh my God, what if? And the other is the history. We look at this, we know the historical. This is what's been lost. Witnessing. We have our role. But also, okay, so I'm sitting in the audience and I'm looking at this stage. There's this stage thing happening, but guess what? You're also on stage too. How do you achieve that? How am I also on stage? Your brother or your coworker or the person you just see, as you walk down the street is up on stage as part of the chorus. Their voice is necessary. And one of the things I'm so excited about as we engage this work in different communities is myself getting to know these folks and being in collaboration with them as they bring their artistry to the piece. So each place we go, there is a different community chorus. There is a chorus of that space that our partners have helped us to be in relation with. Okay, so we had this idea, we were bringing in the community and participation, and Mary Lou Oleski, our head producer at Dartmouth, introduces us to Dr. Shamel Bell, the head of street dance activism and a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, and brings Dr. Bell in as our director of social impact. Okay, so here we are in the opera world. You got a composer, you got some visuals, you got the librettist, you got a director. Well, guess what? Now we need directors of social impact. Dr. Bell brings her wonderful, incredible specialty. We both share this history of having fallen in love with the work of Augusto Boal, who is a was an activist theater maker, South American, who moved the role of audience to that of spect-actor. So you're there to see and witness, but then you also are activated and you can make and change. And Dr. Bell has moved that into the role of co-conspirator. So it's not just we've invited someone in who then has a thing to do, but this is someone we're sharing breath with and who we invite into relationship. So it's not that, so in this case of the community chorus, it's not that, oh, somebody from the community got some people together, they showed up, they rehearsed. No, months before, we engaged them in conversation. You know, Jonathan and Vivi have been so awesome collaborators. There is a section of the opera which we don't know what names are there, because the community, as we're in relationship with them, they will raise up and lift up the names that need to be sang at that moment. And they will be incorporated into the opera. Okay, these are co-conspirators. We were considering how does, because I love the space of reflection and consideration. That is the space of the poetic. We deserve that space. But where is the space of action as well? So Dr. Bell and team were devising 7 rituals that actually surround the reception of the work as an opera. So there will be 6 rituals that you do. You know, once you sign, you say, yeah, I want to go to that thing. Okay, so you know, it's like, here's 6 rituals to prepare yourself to be in relationship to the work. And then after the work, there's a 7th ritual that comes to you that is an action for you to do. And it's even, you know, everything continues to evolve given, you know, our own evolution. I was on a call with Dr. Bell just the other day, and she's like, look, we are all coming at this from different spaces, specifically from our ethnic backgrounds. And so these rituals have to take into account that reality. And you're going to identify your ethnicity, and your rituals will be specific to that relationship to the work. You know, the pandemic has given us a lot of space to consider. It is, you know, we were in a groove. We were ready to do this work, but I think it's become more rich because of the pandemic. Immediately, you know, our producers turned to us and said, hey, do you want to continue working on this in this current situation, or do you want to just postpone? And we looked inward to each other, and we felt deeply that the work has to do its work alongside everything else that's happening in the culture. And we began to, as Enrico was talking about, we began to look into the mediated. What does a mediated performance feel like? And not to give up the live, because the place we've landed conceptually is it is a live performance that also has a mediated component. You know, so if Erica was making this work right now, what might she and her collaborators do? Get out the cell phone, get out the laptop, you know, get out the iPad, and start getting it out there to the folks. Get as many people together as you can in the mask, separate the people you got to separate, and do the work. And so what we are building is a work that exists both for folks who can show up and be there in the room, and folks who need to be reached through some form of mediation of their screen. What's exciting about it is that, so now not only is Erica making this event right here for you right now, she's also manipulating the tools of our world in order to get it out further. And we've got this, you know, the gorgeous paintings and drawings that Enrico has made, and our production designer, Peter Negrini, is creating systems for those works to exist, but then for them to be amplified and to be projected around the space, and for her to be in relationship for them, we go into a dreamscape. What happens when they surround and cover and full and move through? Yeah, and intimacy, the intimacy of the camera, which is an added tool now. The writing of these names. These are all, the tools that we now are incorporating into the work. But in the end, there's a call to action. You said it earlier, but when a brother's breath fails, we pick it up. When a sister's breath fails, we pick it up and keep breathing any way we can. Like it's opera. It's big opera. This is big, people in huge situations. And Erica has work to do. She got to go to another community, and she leaves it in our laps. She's gone. Community chorus is there. We're there. And I think that Jonathan's written some pretty catchy melodies. I hope he doesn't hate me for describing it as catchy. But they invite participation. And part of my work is to create the environment where audiences actually participate by the end of this opera. We got to call from a just world. We got to dream and show the injustices, but also show the possibility for what justice looks like. And we have to insist that we do it together in community. So I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad to be here with these folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niegel. This project sounds so incredibly exciting. Thank you all for your presentations. So much of what you just shared, Niegel, and actually so much of what's been said already is just so relevant to me. I think as a Black woman myself, I really appreciate your attention, the attention in this collaboration to Erica's life as well as her father's. And it makes me think of, in a way, the hashtag Say Her Name movement as well, and just the importance of that. And so thank you all for your work. And I think we'll move into a 20-ish minute moderated discussion right now between the three of you, followed up by a question and answer period from the audience. And so I think, and I invite you all to unmute whenever you'd like to speak. This is an open discussion. I think I'd like to begin maybe taking a step back and just talking for a brief moment about the title of the work. I found that so fascinating. The ritual of breath is the right to resist. And just thinking about the wordplay there on right? Not the legal right. There's the legal right, and then there's the right to resist, as you've spelled it, as right meaning ritual. And Niegel, you've just said a lot about ritual that I find so interesting. And so I'd invite you all to offer your thoughts on how you arrived at this place of ritual and how you were thinking about, how is resistance a ritual? The ritual of breath, how is this tied into activism? And I'm just curious how you got to this place with the collaboration, and how your individual mediums kind of contributed to your thinking about ritual in this project.
I'll jump in really quickly. Jonathan mentioned one of the first iterations of the project focusing on the Yiddish folktale of the wise men of Helm. And really that metaphor that Jonathan was talking about, the fish out of water, gasping for breath, was a way that we connected and made a connection to Eric and his specific untimely death. And we don't have to go into a lot of detail about that, but suffice it to say, breathing was a big part of that, of the narration of his final moments. And that in and of itself was a very powerful metaphor. The breath of life and the lack of breath and the lack of life. And so I think we just began to toy with that idea, and we began to think about how just breathing and just existing is actually a ritual, a rite to resist this kind of dehumanization. So I think that's the sort of beginnings all the way back to 2016, and then 2017 and 18, you know, it just began to get expanded with the brilliance of Niegel and Vaevi's amazing take on the libretto. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll just add that from the get-go, Enrico's paintings, there's something ritualistic in all of those paintings that have both from the sides of the aggressors with their clubs and with their and so that there's the ritual of death and the ritual of breath, and that became sort of a thread that we were working with. Also, this is sort of deep past history, but there was an evolution as the work evolved. We sort of began to compare it the repetition of "I can't breathe" with the 7 last words of Christ, and so there became sort of a ritualistic framework that was there, and then and Vaevi, who has a strong spiritual background both in Judaism and in Christianity, she sort of gleaned onto these things and shaped them and made them, and then lo and behold, there was no 7 last words of Christ, and there was no dead fish. There was just Erica and Vaevi's magic, and it was I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but for me, there's so many things about this process that are entirely uncomfortable in a really wonderful way. Not the least of which is an opera whose inspiration starts from a static painting, and then works out rather than so the imagery and the music were sort of elided from the start, and the story only congealed later once Vaevi came into it, and then Niegel took it and sculpted it into something entirely different. So it's been an amazing experience to see that evolve.
Yeah, I also think that you know, there's an RITE. There's an opportunity for a transformation if you make a sacrifice. I mean, as soon as we got into this pandemic, and you know, I turned to Kim at one point and I was like, this is truly radical now to get in a room and breathe together. I don't know when we'll be able to do that again. But even pre-pandemic, to say, all right, I'm going to give my breath to this. It's part of the rite.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't even really considered the valence that it would have today when breathing together is a radical act, perhaps more than ever. Thank you all for those comments. And I see that topic maybe as connected to the larger framing of this workshop series and the topic of the day, which is arts and justice. So I suppose I'd love to hear your thoughts and anything that came up during your colleagues' presentations about maybe responsibility as artists and questions about justice. What does justice mean to you in this instance, and how did the notion of justice shape this project? How might justice look like in visual art or sound like in music? And how did maybe that shape how you approached this collaboration?
I want to jump in here because there's something that's been happening in Enrico's work that is, I felt a real responsibility towards. There's this series of levitation paintings and a series of paintings with expanses of sky. Okay, and so when do Black folks get a chance to enjoy being part of the metaphysical, but enjoy being part of this an expansiveness? So suddenly, so you go, it happened to me the first time I went out west, and I went, oh my God, I could stretch my arms. Oh shoot. And then Enrico, you did these little detail moments, and I don't know. I just think about getting to be in a moment of selfness, of self-creation. You know, like I think about Enrico. Since we started this, I started to see these images of second line in your work, and that is my my gift. You know, that is these our gift to our community. And so, you know, I just think about Nima's incredible artistry as a musician, and that part of justice is giving Black folks these spaces.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, I think there is a, I don't think we understand the depth to which our behavior is impacted by, you know, 400 years of this sort of environment. And I say that to say there's, you know, not all Black people's experiences are the same, but there is a way that as an African American, you're educated sort of in the cauldron of always being ready, you know, of being able to, of being regimented, of being disciplined, of, you know, being able to minimize or maximize or otherwise shapeshift in this environment. And Nigel's right. I mean, it's hard to even think about not going through one's day and not having those things sort of come up. So to be able to relax is part of the experience, is and maybe being denied the ability to relax and to be in expanse. But at the same time, I think there's just a lot that there's a lot you're holding on to. There's a lot that being the non-dominant part of the society, there's a lot that you're responsible for to juggle and to be at moment's notice able to speak in this language or that language. And so it gets to this idea of regiment, and it gets to this idea of yeah, having to perform, you know, which is constricting. So second line, music, these spaces where you do relax, you do celebrate. Your humanity is there in fullness. It's sort of remarkable that those spaces, and I've never been to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I've been looking at hundreds and hundreds of videos and films over the past couple of years about it. But to me, it's remarkable that that space is still intact, that stuff happens in those neighborhoods. And Eric's breath is linked to that. You know, all of these people's breath is linked to that. And I think when you see someone like Eric be cut down in the way in which he was, and then you look at something like the exuberant freedom of second line, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense that he's devalued in that way. A little bit rambling, but just trying to respond.
Thank you. Thank you. Jonathan, did you want to respond to this? I don't want to cut you off if you were going to jump in here.
No, I actually love listening to Niegel and Enrico.
I do too. Awesome. Yes, I think it can be hard to put into words what justice looks like, right? I hear so much in what you've said, Enrico and Niegel, in just the weight of the past and historical trauma and violence, that the past isn't past, right? That there is something of a ritual in Black death in this country. And then the other side that you're highlighting, Enrico, is joy, that art can point a way toward the future, that music can open up spaces of joy and celebration and humanity, even in the face of all of this suffering. And so that's what I find really, really great about this project. And thank you all for sharing. I wonder if we might move into a question and answer period at this point to take some questions from the audience. So if you are out there in the audience and you have a question that you haven't sent in yet, please take that time to send it in. I think that there are a few questions here that are really great, and I'll go ahead and read them out loud. Perhaps we can start with the question from Jisha Menon. Jisha says, "Thank you for offering us a glimpse into your powerful collaboration that urges us all to bear witness to the unrelenting dehumanization of Black life." And then the question is, "We often think of grief as private, but this opera offers an opportunity for shared witnessing and public expression of grief. How will the isolating online Zoom platform recreate a community of remembrance, or will you wait to stage it until we are all in person again?" So I guess following up on the conversation of mediation, how are you thinking about grief and shared witnessing, and how might that look via Zoom versus on stage in person?
Yeah, so when can it exist again? It will exist in both forms. So there will be a live component and there will be a mediated component. the team has thought deeply about, how to, and I think this is a great question. Thank you, Jusha. How do you show up in a ritual when you aren't in the same space together? One is that it is a time-based performance that you cannot rewind. You have to show up for its beginning, and it will play out, and you will be there with it, and you are meant to be with it until it ends. But it's not going to repeat. It's not going to happen another day. You can, press play. It happens at a specific time. So you got to show up and make that sacrifice. Secondly, it's not just showing up. There are going to be certain settings, aesthetic settings, that an audience member needs to prepare for themselves, because there are going to be elements of participation in the mediated version as well.
Great. Jonathan or Enrico, anything to add there?
No, I'm, as Nigel well knows, my arm had to be twisted into accepting the idea of mediation. But it was the sense that this needs to happen and needs to happen sooner rather than later, that made me a willing participant in this. So I'm swimming in Nigel's wake and trying to keep up.
Excellent.
I defer to Nigel. It's his area of expertise, and staging the opera and thinking about it at that level. So he's our leader.
Absolutely. And what a great leader. All right, excellent. We have a few questions for Enrico, and how your part, Enrico, in the collaboration will look in the final product. So I will direct these to you, but Jonathan and Nigel, please feel free to chime in with your thoughts as well, to kind of combine the questions into one. Someone would like to know, an anonymous attendee, how your visual work will be integrated into the stage. So maybe what that might look like, how you're thinking that might look practically. So maybe you could begin there.
I think there's, I've never worked in collaboration like this before, so there's quite a bit to the process that's new to me, and I'm watching in awe of all the types of things that are happening. I see myself as providing the raw sort of visual material, and it's always changing, it's always evolving. And in the end, when we really have to nail down what it's going to look like, and we've started to do that, we've started, and I'll let Nigel speak to this, but we've incorporated some of the imagery and some of the metaphors into some of the staging so far. But I think, again, we're sort of, I'm making things and we're sort of putting them into piles. We've taken it's taken a fair amount of time to get the music and the libretto locked. And I think that took a lot of time. And so, we're coming up on a time where we're going to get more specific about how things are going to look aesthetically, visually. But to be honest, I don't know. We might use things from the first drawings that were from 2014 and 15, or we might not use anything and only use stuff that I make from now until June or July, or a combination. But just lastly, it's been important to let go of my expectations about what this is supposed to be, because the piece has its own thing going on. And in a way you have to be responsive. I feel like the only way I can interact is to be responsive and be flexible and to not have a set aesthetic that I'm trying to fulfill, because it won't work with the way the music and the libretto have evolved. So, but Niegel can speak to that as well.
Yeah, what I'll pick up on is, Enrico's been amassing this incredible body of work for this piece, and dramaturgically, the way we've embraced that is that Enrico is one of Erica's friends, one of her art pals, and his work is inciting and part of the incitement for making this ritual. And so you can think about it, the way we're thinking about it is part of the toolkit of the ritual. So she's got these the canvas being the scenography, there's these cameras, and so there are moments in which she will train our eyes on certain things, either by manipulating a camera or presenting an image. There are moments in which the images will arrive on their own, whether they are covering her body or another performer's body, or it's a piece of video that's happening next to her, or Jonathan didn't speak earlier, but there actually are these beautiful instrumental passages in 6 of the 7 movements that are prime spaces of reflection on the musical, but also reflection on the visual. And so we're imagining that a lot of that space will be engaged by Enrico's work.
Great. Thank you so much. To follow up on a practical question, someone would like to know if there's a date set for the performance.
I would like to know that too.
Answer pending then. Not quite. That is quite all right. We look forward to it whenever it does happen. I think maybe we can end on a question from Carol Guthrie, and it's directed toward Enrico, but I think that that really it has to do with the whole project. And so any or all of you could share your thoughts. The question is about when Enrico was talking about humanity and how he does not want to lose the individual's humanity. And Carol would like to know, Enrico, if you're talking about an individual's attempt to live their day-to-day life, and if that is what is meant by humanity, or if it's more representative or symbolic than day-to-day experience. And so I think maybe we could open this question up a bit to how humanity is shaping this project, and again, it's a big topic like justice, but how are you communicating humanity through this project, and again, what that might look or sound like, and how it shaped how you approach the collaboration?
I think you could talk about that question conceptually, aesthetically, the idea of humanity, and Niegel and Jonathan certainly, I think, are wrestling with that. I think personally for me, it's both and. I mean, I think the best sort of way to talk about the best example maybe, and I'm gonna become a bit political here, but I think there's a way that If we watched President Obama when he was president and the kind of procedures and regiments that he had to go through in order just to maintain presence on that stage and to maintain the sense of belonging and the sense of ownership of that office. And then if we look at the behavior of our most recent president who's just left office, and we look at the sheer amount of mistakes and gaffes and otherwise opportunities to mar that office, you can understand something about freedom, and you can see something and understand something about where humanity can get squeezed out or wrenched out of someone. So I want every right to be a normal pedestrian person who looks up at the sky, as Niegel alluded to, who walks down the street and does not have to think about the things that I am forced to think about. I want to be an everyday person. And there are glimpses of that, you know, it's not all awful, but I want to be able to make mistakes. I want to be afforded that chance. I don't want to have to be perfect every single step. And I think that's partially where my humanity is being allowed to be a pedestrian and not not being a vigilant soldier all the time.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. Nigel and Jonathan, we have maybe 1 minute left. Any last words on this or anything to close with?
I just want to say I love love these folks. Love them. Love you all.
Same here. This is an ongoing, amazing, transformative experience in all ways. And I could not think of more wonderful people to work with.
Great. I believe that's all. Thank you for such a wonderful and invigorating and inspiring discussion, Jonathan, Enrico, and Nigel. Thank you to the audience for coming and engaging with us today. I so look forward to seeing the results of this collaboration when the work premieres. And I just thank you so much for doing this work because it's so important and timely. So thank you all, and have a great weekend. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Bye, all.